I think acknowledging Filipino-American history is acknowledging American history, right? Filipino history, Filipino-American history is American history. This country is really a nation of immigrants, and each successive wave of immigrants that we see in this country faces its own challenges and opportunities.
I come from the history of Filipinos in general. We've been through a lot to get to where we're at, both personally and as a country.
It's the more openness that we have as a society now to hear different stories and to celebrate different perspectives that has really influenced me to just have more pride in that and to show up more as truly myself.
We really have the Filipino-American National Historical Society to thank for their first proclamation of Filipino-American History Month in 1992. In 2009, Congress declared October as Filipino-American History Month, and in 2015, former President Obama celebrated the first Filipino-American History Month at the White House. October was chosen as the month for Filipino-American History Month to represent the first time Filipinos stepped ashore here in the New World, in Morro Bay, of course, in California in 1587. I think you really have to start with Larry Itliong and the Delano Manongs, who led the Delano grape strike in 1965. This strike led to better working conditions and pay for Filipino and other workers in California. Filipinos and Filipino-Americans have a strong history of serving in this country's military. We have, of course, Telesforo Trinidad, who is the first person of Filipino as well as Asian descent to be awarded the Medal of Honor. He actually is a distant relative on my mom's side. My titos have stories growing up of when they'd go over to his house in Cavite, seeing his Medal of Honor proudly displayed right on top of the piano there. I think we really stand on the shoulders of our ancestors that came to this country with limited options.
My great-grandfather, he's the one that came here in the 1930s. Or actually, he came here in 1928. He went to Hawaii. I think it was the Hawaiian Sugar Planters Association, where they were recruiting Filipinos, mainly Ilocanos and Visayans, to work on their sugar plantations. They were actually going to make Philippines a state. They were trying to do that. One of my great-grandfathers missed his wife, so went back to the Philippines. My other great-grandfather went straight to the mainland, went to Stockton in the 1930s, worked for the farmers there, and then moved down to Southern California, and he had a big farm. My grandpa, Eddie Cabilas, is the reason why that I am here in Southern California. It's because of him. He owned a farm in Carson, which back then was Torrance, but now it's Carson. But thank God for him that he came here, because if he wasn't here, I wouldn't be here.
The sustained different waves of immigration from the Philippines to the United States really speaks volumes about what this country's about and what its people have been through. I think one of the things Filipinos are best at is assimilating, right? We've dealt with colonization going back for a very long time, and we've become very good at assimilating into the new culture.
I was born in the Philippines, and when I came over here to the States when I was very young, I was like the only Filipino that was in my class. And I felt like I didn't belong. My classmates didn't even know like what Asian I was, you know, because of the underrepresentation even in schools.
So I think a common theme was a challenge of identity. There was the assimilation from when I was younger, having moved here when I was 8, English being my third language, trying to sort of like figure out how to fit in and how to be, and while having to succeed, living up to the, you know, the academic sort of expectations as well. And then turns out when I was 25, I was diagnosed with ADHD, which and then it still took many years up until, you know, the last probably 3 or 4 for me to really understand what that means and how that shows up in my daily life and in, you know, in family members too.
I remember coming up that my parents had to assimilate and try to fit in because we grew up in the East Coast with all white people. They were scared to teach me Tagalog, so they said, no, you're going to learn English because we don't want you to be confused and want people to be confused. They were trying their hardest to try to figure out how to fit in. And Filipinos did a great job of assimilating in the United States. I always want to know what my great-grandfather went through because I have that poster in the back where it says no Filipinos allowed. And that's what they went through. But again, Grandpa Eddie never showed me that. He never showed me that he was bitter or pissed about what he went through. Maybe now that I'm an adult, if I could have asked him, he would have told me. And because when I knew him, I was a little kid. I mean, he passed away in 1992, so I was graduating from college then. And I was close to him, but I wish I knew. I wish I could have asked him those questions.
My parents sacrificed a ton for my success. You know, it's a standard story of the American dream. And so, of course, I learned from them that resilience and grit that it takes to start a whole new life with just a dream.
There's this great quote from Jose Rizal, no history, no self. No history, no self, right? I think Filipinos are so good at assimilating that we need to be mindful that as we move forward, we need to recognize the struggles and the achievements of our ancestors. I think to know where you're going, you gotta know where you've come from.
As a Filipino community leader, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is crab mentality. It is something that is part of our whole history because of the colonialism that's happened to us. We feel like there's not enough seats at the table. We feel like we are not enough, and we always try to fight for the spotlight. And if that means pushing somebody down, a lot of us do that. And people don't like to talk about it, but crab mentality is for real.
You know, sometimes we can be siloed, and there's also, generational differences and of course intergenerational trauma and toxicity that we have to overcome. But I think listening to those stories and really hearing the perspectives and understanding that we are all coming from a place where we have been affected by something, and oftentimes it's, colonial mentality within our community that, has really seeped in deep, that affects how we behave and act and feel and go about our lives. So I think it's really important to have those conversations and, try to just open up our minds to each other, and that really builds community.
We have the mainstream media as a creative to convince that we belong, that our stories belong. I mean, even nurses, we've been in this country for forever, and people don't even see us on TV as nurses. It's as if we don't even exist. So we need to stop fighting within our own community and start lifting each other up. As a community leader, it's something that I absolutely talk about all the time because it's the only way we're going to eradicate it, and hopefully the next generation doesn't have to deal with all of this colonialism mentality that we've had to battle. If I can pave the path in some way, if I can make it easier for them to feel seen, that is what I fight for every single day.
I think what piqued my interest in my Filipino culture was something as simple as just scrolling through social media. I was looking at Austronesian culture and trying to understand why is it that our people have a debate whether we're Asian, whether we're Pacific Islander. And the moment that I myself realized we do have more than what's in the Philippines, I've decided, you know what, our people were warriors, and that is something to be proud about. And once I realized that, it definitely made me teach myself to understand and accept that I'm way more than just a regular American. I'm way more than just a Filipino. I'm a Filipino American, and bringing those two cultures together is something that's really special, especially for somebody that's an entrepreneur.
These days, we see Filipinos in all different kind of fields, right? I mean, I think Lloyda Lewis is one of the greatest examples. She's a powerful, successful businesswoman as well as a philanthropist. We also have Filipinos and Filipino Americans in academia. So look at the work of Dr. Nadal as well as the work of Tony De La Rosa. Last, I'd probably point to what most people are familiar with, which would be pop culture. I mean, everyone knows a song by Olivia Rodrigo, Bruno Mars, Her, or Sweetie.
There's something about Filipino Americans today that you see with the creativity that they bring. It's on another level. When I'm watching what Filipino editors bring, there's an extra fire. Michelle Tesoro on Queen's Gambit, she's amazing. And she did Maestro too. There's a lot of Filipino Americans out there like killing it right now.
It wasn't easy being, a brown woman in corporate to just take up space, but I knew that I needed to find a way to take up space. I think it's really important for people to see themselves in spaces and hearing stories that they can resonate with and can be inspired by.
We really owe the opportunity to exist in different spaces and in different professions to the Filipinos who came here originally.
The foundation of Filipino culture and our cultural values is the idea of kapwa, the collective, our shared identity. And I think modern society, has us leaning more towards like self-isolation, self-progress, that like consumerism, capitalism. And it's really important to remember kapwa. That's our nature.
Filipino Americans in general, even outside of the creative industry, are resilient people because of our past and our history and where we come from. It's part of our blood. We're fighters, we're warriors, and that spills over into whatever industry that we're doing.
There is no right or wrong way to be a Filipino American, but what I have is success that I believe was 100% blessed by God with me. And I want to be able to share that, show them that it was a Filipino American that showed you and helped you how to do it. And we can all definitely eat together at our table.
Well, I like to think of heritage is where your parents grew up, maybe what you ate growing up, and whether or not you have coins in your pocket at midnight on New Year's Eve. History, on the other hand, specifically Filipino American history, now that's over 400 years of persistence, resilience, and ultimately empowerment. The Filipino American story really is the story of America. We look at different groups that are immigrating now, different groups that have immigrated throughout the history of this country, and we really see common struggles to get established, fleeing war-torn countries, all of these different things that bring people to America. I think that Filipinos are another part of that narrative and ultimately an important part of that narrative. And I'll be honest, I've got a son now. He's 2 years old, and I think about his heritage and his history as an American because he's mixed race just like I am. And I think knowing what his ancestors have been through and knowing the sacrifices they've made as well as the accomplishments that they have, I think it's real important for him moving forward.